Hello everybody, this is your professor from your Java programming class, and what I want to do in this lecture is to go over more of the JavaFX features. In the previous chapter we had talked about some of the very basic concepts of how the scene builder would allow you to create a stage and then bring on a scene and then add some components to it, and how we can then write the Java code and the controller and make it all work together. In this lecture we will continue to expand more of those components and look into each of their properties and see how much more we can do with those individual components. Now remember, JavaFX has a very rich library, and you can bring in a lot of the media into the JavaFX, and in this case or in this lecture we will go over some of the codes where we will bring in other images and files and see how they are interacting with each other. So let's look into more of the JavaFX components and layouts and things like that. So as I mentioned earlier, we will look into radio buttons, list views. These are your components that you can bring onto your scene. We can also look into more of the layout options, border panes, title panes. These are all my layout controls, and of course we can also add more of the mouse events. So let me go over a few of these things that we will be seeing. So we will see the use of the list view, and I already mentioned about how we can tie all these individual components into the controls property and the value. So we will also do a painter application where I can use a radio button to create more shapes. In this particular paint application you have a slider that you can drag back and forth, basically left and right, to increase the color mixer. It's all given out by some of the codes, which is the which allows you to make the color a little lighter and then all the way very deep. So we'll look into some of that. So this is the color chooser, and I'll go over that in the code, and I'll show you some of the codes that we have done, or I have done from the book, just to go over and show you how to do things. So here, radio button, list view, title pane. So these are more additional layouts over and above what you have seen before. Sliders, we can display rectangles and circles. Let's go over a few more. Some of the individual properties of the scene that we would create. So layout nodes in the scene graph. We have our height and width, and the book does a good job in explaining step by step as to how you would create those things, and then from the scene builder how you can change some of the GUI properties. Everything is going to be associated with some kind of a property, and then you can open up that property and change things there, and that's not what I'm going to be I would not go step by step through that process. I would be more inclined to go over the code, because that's an easy part that you can always do by following instructions. But I'll go through the code and make sure that you know how everything is working together to create that application. So more about the layout panes, the positioning of that, and it talks about how you can move it, how you can control that, and it talks about where it is coming from. So this is the scene layout package that they are using. So here are the different kinds of panes: anchor pane, border pane, flow pane. You will see that being used. More other panes like grid pane. We had the previous one, I believe, was a grid pane that we had used, where you had rows and columns, and then you can have stack pane and title pane, H box and V boxes. So different kinds of layouts that you will be seeing over here. So this is one of the applications that you can create where you can have the title pane where you can select some of these radio buttons, and if you press any one of them, then you will see, you know, how it's going to interact and you know, change the colors. So this is the layout. This is the VBox layout that you have, and this is all in a grid pane. So basically this is one row and this is another one. These are some of the radio buttons that you have there. So these are radio buttons and toggle groups. You will see here border pane layout, and here is your border pane 5 areas. So if you depending upon the application that you're trying to create, if you want to create something where you have a top section, bottom, left, center, and right, you can choose this. Then we have your mouse event, which FX would support. So, you know, on click or roll over, you know, those are all supported. So on mouse click, mouse drag exited, you know, so all these mouse events are there. And this kind of tells you about what are the different kinds of events and what exactly would it do. This is now getting more into the files that we'll be seeing. You know, we will be doing the GUI, and then we will also creating some of the controllers. We have seen that example, and I will, you know, continue showing you some of the codes that we will be doing. So I just wanted to make sure that this is important right here. Every single component that we will see is going to be associated with this Fox ID, which is then going to be tied in the controller. So you would have that @fxml, and then you have the ID that's going to associate that, and then in the controller you'll be adding some of the logic to what it should be doing. Okay, so this is kind of breaking it down, where, you know, you have this radio button, and this is the drawing area pane that you will be creating, and then, you know, we're going to be configuring this. So these are some of the steps, and this is what I was referring to earlier. It gives you step by step, you know, what you can do, and it's pretty simple. As you go through it, it will let you change the properties, you know, 640 versus 480, and then, you know, padding property to 8. So you can actually visually see, as soon as you change the property, how your layout actually changes. And that's the biggest advantage of that scene builder. You know, it's an independent application that works with separate IDEs, and you can see, you know, by moving some of those GUI components, how the scenes are changing. So this is, again, you know, these are the steps that they are going through, and I'm not going to go through this too much. So this is the controller class. Now let me just go back over here just a little bit. So these are still the steps that they are going through. Now after we do this, you know, after we set these sizes, this is the part that we will be creating. So this is my controller class. So when we create a controller class, you know, this fxml file at runtime must specify the controller class. This is where if you open that fxml, you will see there's a controller class, and you need to make sure that you associate the controller class with the fxml file that you're creating, because that's how you create that connection. Okay, and I'll point that out to you again when I show you the code. So method names, and this is our sample controller class. So in general, every time you're going to see at least 3 files, you would have the fxml. That's the same file that can be created with the scene builder, and then you would have the main class file, and this is the one that is going to house the main method, which is going to call that start method. You know, the main method would have the launch method. The launch is going to call the start method, and the start is what is going to create that connection between the controller class. So it will get the resources, it will get the class, it will load the resource from the controller class, and then you can create a stage and add a scene to it, and then add the scene to the stage, and then basically call the show method. So that's pretty much you know, 5-6 things that you will be doing for every single main application. It's more of the test application that you write when you have dealt your with classes and objects. And then you would have the controller, and that is where you would have the code for all the action events that you would tie with those nodes. So if you have a radio button, if you have a slider, if you have a label with a text field, if you have any kind of a button, and the control of all those individual nodes are going to be all written out in that controller. Okay, so those are the three things you would need at least. Now sometimes you may need other classes that you would create, where you would use that in your controller method, and I'll point those things out to you as I come across some more of those things. So this is now getting into this code, and this is where I'm going to get into or create a different video where I'm going to go over the code and again show you how to start create some of these applications, the FXML application.